Hello,
Okay, what's
everyone.
going on?
Hello, everyone. My name is Rashard Snellings. I am with the South Fulton Coalition. Today we have Representative Park Canon with us. She represents District 58. So, Ms. Representative Canon, I just wanted to extend a warm welcome on behalf of the South Fulton Coalition. Now, about the South Fulton Coalition, the mission of the coalition is to implement action programs for the continued improvement, accountability, and integrity of the City of South Fulton government and as elected officials. We focus in the areas to educate, disseminate information, and engage City of South Fulton residents and its visitors. We advocate on behalf of City of South Fulton residents to interact with leadership, to ensure community-driven inputs into decision-making, and to provide financial support to causes that promote our mission and the benefit of our community. So that's a little bit about the South Fulton Coalition. Tonight we have Brianna McGeehan. She is a resident of the City of South Fulton. So at this time, I would like to turn it over to Brianna. She will be your moderator for tonight. Brianna.
Okay, hey everyone, my name is Brianna McGeehan. I've lived in the city of South Fulton for 5 years since the city's inception. I'm a singer-songwriter and a music teacher and a mom of 2. And yeah, I'm very excited to be here and to hear more about Representative Canon and what she's all about. So with that said, I'll pass it off to our featured speaker, Representative Park Canon. You have 5 minutes to introduce yourself and share what you're all about.
Thank you so much for having me. I am greeting you from mid-Fulton, where I live in the Old 4th Ward. It is a historically Black neighborhood where we have mixed income folks. We have the largest concentration of Section 8 housing on Boulevard, about 2 blocks from where I live. And we also have folks who are in Inman Park with really high income earning, long-term neighborhood plans. And then we have y'all, the City of South Fulton. And I'm really excited to be a part of your community formally, even though I feel like over the years, I was just like right over the fence from y'all and didn't get an opportunity to spend too much time. I've spent the last 6 years as a state representative and a preschool educator here in Atlanta, and I want to continue doing the job. There is an election on May 24th, to which I do ask for your vote, but more importantly, I'm looking to hear more about the issues and concerns and ideas that you have, because I am that millennial who you want at the table working for you. Over the past 6 years, I have been able to pass 20 pieces of legislation that have impacted healthcare and been signed by the governor, as well as impacting our schools, our environment, our transportation, and housing. Now, getting into all of those issues is something that I love to do. I have a bunch of different legislative documents that are pulled up that talk about the bills that we've passed and the work that we've done. But I also am really active on social media. So you can always just reach in with a quick question and don't have to feel like it has to be a formal meeting at the state capitol. But at the state capitol, we have been working on making sure that people understand that there is a trickle-down effect on the way that their elected officials represent them and the issues and the needs that they actually get met. So it was, my interest to run for office, but it was also because someone asked me, a person who was already elected, who had seen the work I had been doing in the community as a young organizer for the issues related to reproductive justice and environmental justice, called me. And I stepped off MARTA because I was running to the train, and I answered the call. And I learned about what would be a 6-week election to become a state representative. After that election, there was a runoff, It was the presidential primary year, so there was another election. 2018, there was another election. 2020, there was another election. And now we're in 2022. Let me stop that phone from ringing so that I can finish chatting with you. Thank you for that. I'm sure I probably have about 30 seconds left. And so I want to just tell you about the committees that I'm on at the state capitol and the leadership positions that I hold. I'm on the Creative Arts and Entertainment Committee, which is a new working group appointed by the Speaker of the House 2 years ago. It has created for us to provide the Black Music and Entertainment Walk of Fame in our district and a host of other exciting entertainment issues. I serve on the Ethics Committee because I am the secretary of the Democratic Caucus, and that's an automatic appointment that I get. So if there are issues between members of different parties or same parties, the Ethics Committee comes together to make a decision on those infractions. I'm also on the Insurance Committee, so issues related to healthcare and also automobile insurance and home and life insurance are my specialty. I also serve on the Small Business Development Committee, which is my favorite committee because small businesses run the state. And we actually never had a definition for small business before our committee came together. So it's really been interesting to see how working in these committees at the state capitol does allow for effectiveness. Thank you for asking me a little bit about who I am and what I do.
Thank you for sharing. So to start, I have a few questions for you, and then I'm going to pass it off to the community so that they can ask their questions. And it looks like a few more people have joined, which is fantastic. Welcome, everybody. So the first question I want to ask is a very basic question. What do you do in the House of Representatives? If you were going to give me the most plain answer of what it is that your job is, what is it?
State representatives balance the state budget. There are $30 billion in our state budget. And we are tasked with coming to the Capitol for 40 days every year and asking for a piece of that pie. I feel as though I've gotten really good at asking for money for our hospitals and our schools. And I'm going to continue to ask for money in the budget for our district. This past year, we got a $300,000 HIV program that we've been working on for 3 years. We also got money to expand Medicaid for recently pregnant people. Most folks would say mamas. As a person who works in birth, I also serve as a birth doula and have helped clients all the way throughout the pandemic, both in hospitals and birth centers, but also in home births. I think it's really important that we continue to bring our language forward and really talk about how people can become pregnant regardless of their gender identity, and understanding that our state has a stake in making sure that the disparities relating to pregnant people who are Black or brown that are exorbitantly higher in deaths, that it is really on the state's hands. So we continue to ask for money to remedy the issues that we see in our district.
Awesome. All right. So my next question is, we were all wondering, what are the boundaries of your district? If you could explain to us, for instance, I'm in District 7. So I don't think I am in your district, but we just are, we don't have clarity exactly on what is District 58.
District 58 was recently redistricted in November of 2021 to go further west than it currently did. So most folks knew that it used to be Midtown, downtown, and Southwest Atlanta, all within the city of Atlanta. It literally stopped at the Kroger on Cascade and did not cross over 285. Now the district crosses over 285 because it is more of a western district after redistricting. And so as it crosses 285 at Cascade, you hit Fairburn Road, and then you can go left or right, really. And it gets I guess you would call it like a little cube of your city that is mostly nestled in the city council district that is currently represented by Catherine Rawell, who has been a mentor to me over the years before I was elected and before she was elected. We were both working at the Bedford Pines Section 8 housing together. And we were doing work to figure out what were the needs of pregnant people or recently pregnant people in that Section 8 housing. So I'm really excited. Like I said, I'm like beaming to represent this area and want to continue to knock doors so that I can continue to get to know the district door by door as well.
Okay, cool. I'm going to go ahead and ask one more question that's a bit more personal. It's something that I'm very curious about, and then I will pass it off to the community. So in Georgia, we don't have a lot of renewable energy at the moment. And I am wondering what you will do as our representative to move towards renewable energy and to move away from the fossil fuels industry. And, give access, I guess, to Georgians that don't have a lot of resources to things like solar panels.
Yes, this is one of my favorite issues. I'll start by saying we are hosting the National Caucus of Environmental Legislators here in Atlanta on May 20th and 21st. I have served as the National Caucus of Environmental Legislators Georgia lead for the past 2 years. And so a lot of the legislation that you see going to the Energy Committee at the state capitol or the Telecommunications Committee, because they are kind of together, and the Natural Resources Committee has come from the work that we have been doing as a national caucus. Now, when we drill down on the issues, we can talk about a bunch of them. We can bring the federal government conversation into play with the Better Business Act and how there are these ideas that it will create access for our communities to have solar panels and more clean water. But I really think that this is more of a state and local issue. So we've been digging our teeth in. The first thing that we have asked to do is to reverse course on Plant Vogtle. We have spent so much money as a legislature on Plant Vogtle to get it up and running. It is a nuclear power plant in South Georgia, but we have also passed the buck on to the ratepayer. So each of us, when you look at your power bill, you will see that there is actually a line for Plant Vogtle and it keeps going up. So we just put in a resolution right before session was over to urge the Public Service Commission to revert course on that. I'm going to throw it in the chat here and then y'all can look at it later. The second thing is when we started to realize that there were lead water issues in our schools, specifically at that point, it would be Atlanta Public Schools and Fulton County Schools, and that the remuneration that needed to happen was being passed back and forth between who was going to pay for it. We started to do our own sort of consortium of rain barrel collecting. And I don't know if anyone has done rainwater collecting in barrels, but we have some over at the Metropolitan community garden that we have right next to the Metropolitan Parkway in the old District 58. And it's really served as a pilot test program for a statewide thing that we want to do. So I just ask you to stick with me on the environmental issues. Know that we are super on top of it. And it's one of my, favorite parts of being a legislator, to really help people see that state legislators do too impact the way that we move forward in a green society. We just got to make the transition.
Very cool. Thank you for bringing up Plant Vogtle. I've known about that for a while, and it's pretty crazy. So thank you for your work on that. I'm going to pass it off to the community now, who has a question for Representative Canon.
Thank you for being here, Representative Canon. I have a question regarding the City of South Fulton's charter. So, should you be reelected, one of the things that you're going to be asked to do is select a resident from the City of South Fulton to take part in the city's charter change commission. So, have you given any thought to what you would expect to see out of this person that you would nominate to be on this commission, or what are some of the things you're going to look for in this particular individual? And the second part to the question is, do you believe that the city of South Fulton has the correct structure? Currently, we have a weak mayor, strong council. Should we maintain that current structure, or is there an appetite to change it?
Thank you for the questions. Both questions, I think, are something that it's important for me to get a little bit more acclimated into the city before I can answer. Everyone who does know me knows that when I do have an opinion, I research it, I take it to heart, and I'm not afraid to tell the truth about it. So I would be open to hearing, recommendations of who should be, a part of this charter conversation. I will say during this redistricting process, I have gotten more astute to understanding really what happens behind the doors of redistricting and how the charters actually sometimes help or hurt the districts that they are set out to serve. So I look forward to, figuring out what the delegation thinks is right, and then also creating my own opinion on that. In consulting with, the mayors and the council members, it is only right for me to hear them out first before making my own decisions on that. I just absolutely would respect someone who would do that, in my own area, and hope that people can understand why, because it is such a new city and because there have been, so many different changes over the years, that y'all know best, not me, until I start to dig down into the details on it. What I can speak to, though, is hiring people, making sure that people are a part of a diverse coalition and that people are there to work. I have always talked about the importance of calling into question the diversity of the staff of government officials. I'm proud to be the second person to have a transgender person on my staff at the state capitol, and have really been illuminating issues that come up there when people before thought it was okay and a joke to misgender people. I've also been one of the first 5 legislators to have staff that do not only speak English. We have 5 languages represented in our office. I've got 2 of them, well, 3. I speak English, Spanish, and Portuguese fluently. And so really trying to build out a team is one of my favorite things to do. I normally take part in a design thinking process. It is a Stanford School of Design type of team building and idea formation that allows for ultimately you to fail the first attempt in learning. You start to build a minimum viable project, and then you start to, perfect on that product. And so I feel as though right now y'all already have, some version of an MVP, and I would be interested in coming in and helping to make that most diverse, whether it's related to the person's employment, if we need an attorney who's on there, or if we don't need an attorney, we need a community member. I think that there's plenty of time and space for me to be a part of that. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
All right, who's next? I'll ask another question while we're waiting. I have plenty of questions. So in terms of criminal justice reform, that's something that I feel very passionately about. Our bail system is criminal in and of itself. What will you do to change the bail system to help those that are innocent and imprisoned, to help root out racism that is inherent in our criminal justice system so that we can see real change in Georgia.
I love it. So we actually had an issue come up over the past 3 years because the city of Atlanta and Fulton County moved forward with making sure that people have access to being released from jail without having to pay exorbitant percentages of their yearly income or more than their yearly income. And because we did that, the parties that are in power at the state capitol started pushing legislation that would restrict what type of offenses would be able to be handled without high bail fees. We fought it until literally sine die, the last day of legislative session. And I am proud to say we killed the bill. The bill did not pass. We had a number of attorneys, legislators, advocates at the Southern Center for Human Rights, the Georgia Innocence Project, like all of these amazing groups come together and help bolster our opinions against it, but we were ready to go to the floor. I will also address the fact that many of you may know that I was unlawfully arrested last year. And even though I was arrested knocking on the governor's door and the charges were dropped because it was pretty clear that I was not obstructing justice and that it was not a felony that warranted that type of behavior. I've always been interested and deeply passionate about making sure that people do not have to learn ways of life by going to jail. And so I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. I have put together bail funds for people before who are protesting, but also who have just faced, municipal court fees. Maybe they got a parking ticket and they couldn't pay it and the fees came up. And so it's really nice to know that over these 6 years, I've built relationships with organizations, individual attorneys, as well as advocates and people with real stories to really address the fact that our state is the most carceral state in the United States of America. And we continue to put people behind bars instead of addressing mental health, physical health, and community services.
Okay, thank you for that response.
And I saw a question.
Yeah.
There was a hand. Well, Miss Harris is
Raising
raising now, so maybe she'll want to ask her question out loud.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello.
I sure can. Perfect.
Okay.
You're good.
I have two questions. The first question is, what will hospitals look like for in the city of South Fulton in the future? And number two, are you familiar with the Sterigenics facility on Boat Rock and Fulton Industrial and its impact on the environment? What are next steps?
Thank you for the questions. So recently I did hear that Wellstar announced something that was very devastating to the South Fulton community, which is that they would only be moving to an urgent care model and not having an emergency room for people to access. So I called them and I talked to them. Wellstar has been working with me over the years, and we have a lot of positive working relationships. So I'm looking forward to continuing that conversation with them. They have already heard from me very clearly that I feel passionately about not taking away people's access to healthcare in a state that already does not fund healthcare and uses jails as ways to give people access to healthcare. So as the conversation continues to develop, I'm excited to be forthcoming about that and let people know that I completely have disagreed with their decision to move to an urgent care model. I am looking at the numbers though, and I am trying to find out a solution so that we can not have to go too much further, even though they are already announcing this and moving forward with it, to see what the state can do.
Are there any other options in terms of other hospitals, such as Grady or north side. I noticed there's a new, a smaller hospital being built on right off of 285 and South Atlanta Road. Is it possible to go to another hospital, or Grady is more like a training type situation? Would you consider talking with them to see if they have an interest?
I've had positive working relationships with Grady as well as Emory over the years.
Mhm.
I would be happy to have that conversation. As a new member in the South Fulton House delegation, I think that we can all agree there are multiple legislative initiatives and personalities to navigate. I plan to navigate those personalities in a way that helps for South Fulton to have access to healthcare. So, you know, it really is up to not just the hospital systems, but also on the legislators. And I take that issue very seriously. I just need to be formally inducted into the South Fulton delegation to do South Fulton business. Right now, I am only in the City of Atlanta delegation up until technically January 1st. But, you know, once we get past the May 24th, they already know I'm chomping at the bit to be in some of those conversations. I do want to address the stereogenics conversation. And I want to say really clearly that these are the types of environmental harms that have permeated our communities for generations. So of course it is not new to us that these harmful toxins were being, exposed up in Cobb County, down in Boat Rock on Fulton Industrial. But for the media, for some of the power players, there is a really important moment happening right now where there is what I call interest convergence. When people determine that their idea, even though it seems way over here, and the other person's idea actually converge. And it's not even for the initial reason. So I do think that the additional attention that has happened on these stereogenics plants across the state and across our tri-county area has been necessary and has been warranted. I'm proud that, one of our legislators has taken it on as her issue, and that she is now running for Attorney General, because ultimately where this goes is the state has to be sued over these infractions that have happened over the years. And really only an Attorney General will do that. But as we have requested for the Attorney General who is sitting right now to act on those issues, he has been unwilling to.
Thank you.
Pamela Harris, did you have another question or was that it?
That's it for now. Yes, that's it.
Okay. I see Drew DeMann has had his hand up for a bit. Can you unmute yourself, Drew?
I think I'm unmuted now. Am I audible?
You are audible.
I am audible. Okay. Hi, Park. Fascinating listening to you. And my question circles back to the incident at the Capitol when you were arrested and detained. And to me, that put kind of a stark light on the State Patrol and the Capitol Police, who are, I guess, one and the same, right? Just in terms of them being on a political side. And I think that one of the things that we're used to in America as a conception of the police, or a perception of the police, as being apolitical. And to me, it was a probably unintended signal, but a signal nonetheless, that that particular police entity has a particular political alignment. And, without, I guess, putting you on the spot politically, so to speak, do you have any thoughts about what that incident says about the nature of the state patrol when it comes to restricting voting rights.
Thank you for the question. Hey to the little one who's in the back. The pre-K educator in me cannot not say hey.
Right.
But I am really proud that Georgians amplified what happened that day because it helped Georgians cope with their own experiences with police, I believe. I believe that it validated some of the unlawful arrests that have happened in Fulton County by state patrol members, state troopers who don't live anywhere near here, but drive 3 hours and spend that whole time on their way here trying to figure out who's doing what wrong. I truly want police to serve communities. I'm proud to be a servant leader who does not make a lot of money, and police are basically in a similar frame. They are public servants who do deserve more pay and do deserve more support, but they also need more training. And so that incident, absolutely, I mean, my attorneys would love to talk, to you more about this, and we're not done yet either. This is the second big case of the state troopers arresting state legislators who both happen to be Black women. Before it was now United States Representative Nikema Williams, who was unlawfully dragged away with a number of other South Fulton folks, Fulton County people, to the jail. And, this time it was me. And so we have really seen, I would say, through the policymaking piece, the way that things are staggered absolutely tell the story. I'll finish by saying when Rayshard Brooks was killed at the Wendy's in 2020 in the summer, we had his funeral, and we had it at my home church, which is the historic Ebenezer Baptist Church. You will hear, Tyler Perry helped pay for it and T.I. helped pay for it, but Rayshard has 3 little girls, and we just welcomed a little boy into the family this past year. For that family, understanding that it wasn't technically a state trooper who ended his life, but a lot of the same types of trainings that state troopers hadn't had, he hadn't had. The same types of communities and events and social clubs that he attends, they attend to. So it really has helped us to draw a line in between police brutality issues across the state. When Ahmaud was killed, it helped us draw lines all the way from Brunswick and Glenn County back up to Fulton and Atlanta in the state capital. So I hope that there is a bit of hopefulness that people see that the same experiences they might have felt that they didn't have legal representation for, or a whole world watching, trying to get them out of jail, that they know that they have someone in me who will always continue to push back on the state troopers because of what we know, which is that the Federal Bureau of Investigations gave us a report in 2010, again in 2014, that said that the Ku Klux Klan has and is still currently infiltrating the Georgia State Patrol.
Awesome. Well, thank you. That's very illuminating. It leads me to one other question that I have for you that's more Atlanta centric, but related. And I actually just heard some news this afternoon related to the Entrenchment Creek Park. Will you please hold on a second, dude? The Entrenchment Creek Park development of both the movie studio, but perhaps more importantly, the police facility. And again, to me, I mean, I just look at the kind of symbolic and messaging layer of this and the optics of it in a way, which are that, essentially what that proposed development for a police facility does is it sort of aggregates police from all over the region and different law enforcement from all over the region, and to do particular types of training that appear to be geared towards potential repression of social movements, or more draconian measures in urban environments. And knowing what happened in 2020 in the US, we can only imagine that the powers that be are most interested in training the police to effectuate repression of social movements. And I wonder if you could speak to that development and the issues it raises.
Totally. I have been involved in this conversation about Cop City since it went to Atlanta City Council. You know, we were organizing to make it really clear, this is Muskogee land. This is land that has already been full of atrocities and was actually being left alone, as it should be for a little while. You know, I mean, we know it's the old prison farm, right? And the conversations on that can be pretty intense or saddening at times, to think about what that trauma looks like. What is that land really called to be a part of? And so there was clamoring by the Atlanta Police Foundation and police officers and city council members who are very pro-police saying, we'll give it to you for $10 a year. You know, we would just love for you to have it. And for them, it feels like, oh, we've got it back. Like, and we're going to make some promises about the programs that we'll run and how we'll do bias training and how we'll do de-escalation. And I want all of that. I want all of those pieces and those programs to be there. But my deep concern mostly lies where many of the community activists issues lie, which is really that if we are continuing to create the largest police training facility, larger than NYPD, larger than in San Francisco, larger than in Chicago, what are we saying to our kids? How are we providing for a safe community when this is going to be the largest weapons testing facility and we have a huge nuclear plant that's only a few hundred miles away? What are we really planning for? You know, what urban farming is really going to go down? And you know, what happens to the, unnamed tributary there too? So there's a lot of issues that are still very current with this this development. And the happiest thing that I can report is that the city council members who were responsible for putting this legislation forward and passing it did not survive re-election.
Thank you, Drew Demand, for that question. Mike Edwards has had his hand raised for a while. Mike, could you go ahead and unmute yourself? Mike Edwards, are you ready to ask your question? Okay, South Fulton Coalition has also had their hand raised for quite some time.
Okay, and I'm sure Mike will come off mute in a little while.
Okay.
Hello, Park. My name is Ron Booth, and I have a quick comment and then a question. I watched your unjust arrest, and I was personally upset about it. I'm happy to see how smart and well-informed you are, and to see that you're a real level and balanced person, which tells me even more how wrong that arrest was. I just want you to know that. My question for you is this. Today, Governor Kemp signed House Bill 1084. It's also known as Protect Students First Act. I would like to get your thoughts on this bill.
Oh yeah, 9:30 this morning, my phone was ringing. They sent out the media release yesterday evening that said that the governor would be signing about 6 different education bills. 5 of those, the House Democratic Caucus completely disagreed with. House Bill 1084, the divisive concepts bill that all of a sudden got a quick little amendment at the end to target certain types of students in sports. Yeah, it hits really deeply. I think I've said a few times on here how being an educator has really impacted my legislative experience. I'm very like, let me think about this. Let's put a team. Let's be inclusive. Let's take our time. Let's study it. Let's appropriate it. Let's work on this. This bill, it was always rhetoric. And the main rhetoric that I focused in on when I went to the well to speak against it, there's only a few members who can go to the well on any issue, big issues, they debate them back and forth. And so this bill was actually a whole nother bill number before. And so when we debated that bill, my speech focused on the lines that talk about psychological distress. They basically are saying that if students are taught about racism and they start to feel psychological distress, it's on the educator and it's the educator's issue. And that educator can face sanctions, losing their license, suspension, all of these punitive measures. When in fact, that's when the conversation happens. We all know what it's like to have been on a field trip one day to a museum and you see a thing and you're like, whoa, that's interesting. You don't have the perfect question to ask your educator. It's your educator. You just ask them. You might say, why did Black people feel that way? Or why were they doing that to Black people? And if that educator is now being demonized by school boards, by high school associations, by outside agencies, political action groups, the governor's office, the superintendent's office, the police, how do we move forward in really educating our kids? So this was a piece of legislation that from the start, I was proud to, speak against. The Georgia Association of Educators, which recently endorsed our campaign, they were talking to us a lot about some of the, smaller pieces within the bill that they could work with, that they could work around, but the parts that they could not work around were signed into law today. The second thing I'll say about that bill, which I know for some people, conversations about transgender students can be very personal or it can be very external. And so as a person in the LGBTQ community, I want people to know that I am someone that you can always ask the wrong question or like kind of not get it right or get it perfectly and be super passionate about, because I don't think that this is a conversation that can just be fixed, in any sort of way. Transgender students, when they are going with their doctors, going with their families to determine that their biological makeup is one, not conducive for their mental health, two, out of line with who they truly believe that they are, and three, able to be achieved by doctors who are competent, they deserve to go to school and to be respected. So this bill at the last minute, 15 minutes before the session was over, they did an amendment. And when you do an amendment, you cannot debate the amendment. So we could not debate this additional part. But what it concisely says is that there is a new association created, the Georgia High School Sports Association, and it can make its own decisions as it relates to transgender girls in sports, meaning someone who has transitioned from male to female. And as we know, Title IX does not allow for sex discrimination. So we are already mounting our legal challenges to this bill being signed into law today. We were trying to get an op-ed in the paper. I'm praying that we can get it in on Monday because Friday press isn't the best press. But please know that this is one of the issues that I do care about deeply. And I'm really glad that you asked me about it.
Well, thank you for that.
Okay, Mike Edwards, we're ready for you. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, am I muted?
You are not. We can hear you.
Okay, good evening, everyone. This question is for Park Canon. What is your take on State Bill 319? And that is the unpermitted concealed carry in the state of Georgia that Kemp signed into law a few weeks back.
I am deeply opposed. I stood with the caucus when we took our position against the bill. I'll never forget that day. We have all these different bills that are coming before us, and some are long and some are short. And some we get a heads up on, and some we don't. This bill was literally all of that. We've known for years that they wanted this on a campaign promise to make it so that there can be guns everywhere with no permits. We also knew that there was like two legal arguments. One argument, which is that, well, if you believe in the Second Amendment and you take it to court over your probate court judge saying that you didn't have a permit, you might win in a state of Georgia, in a state like Georgia. They might say, yeah, you just, we're following the Georgia Constitution. But then there's also the argument that says the GOP has been really concerned, and a lot of Democrats too, as we should, about rising crime. And so how do you then say that you're just going to allow guns everywhere that can't be traced? We've had issues in the district before about the sale of guns that are not tracked, not traced, guns finding their way on school buses and in kids' backpacks and taking lives of kids and dogs and family members. And so we were really preparing for all, of the options. And so the day that we found that the bill had gone from its subject committee to the rules committee, which is the committee that determines the rules of debate on the floor, we all huddled together. As the caucus secretary, it is my job to make sure that people are in the meetings, but also to write down and take note of the caucus positions. And I was really proud that day to count as fast as I could to get up to about 76 members who opposed that bill. And I want to just end by saying, I think that we can all have some clarity around wanting the ability to protect your family and protect yourself, especially in a time like now where people are more interested in arguing than simply working together. But this bill goes way too far. So I am in support of people having licenses to carry and for the probate court judges to remain the distributors of those licenses.
Great. So what is the next move in reference to possibly getting this bill overturned?
Thank you. So we have been working with two groups, one that's national and one that's local, to really talk about what is the harm of this bill and how we can actually involve police officers in tracking how many untraceable guns that we find in our communities. So the next conversations that I see are back to the table with the same sheriffs who, honestly, at a certain point, they threw their hands up in an election year. And it was devastating to see that happen and to see the lobbying firms allow for that to happen. But there are some corporations that are deeply upset by this, and I believe that they will be the ones leading the conversations with the police officers. And then, like I said before about this interest convergence thing, I believe that there will be an interest convergence between the police officers and the legislators who pass this bill to figure out if there is some way that this does not go so far. I am hopeful that once this electoral cycle is over and these campaign promises are taken away, that we'll have an attorney general who will sue the state and who will sue on behalf of members of the state to get this law repealed. But for now, it was signed into law at a gun shop, and it's law.
Okay. Well, let me just say this and I'll close. My concern about this bill is that you're allowing people, anybody to carry a concealed weapon, and most people that are going to be carrying these weapons probably haven't had a day of certifiable training. And bullets don't have eyes. You can't shoot, you don't have any business carrying a gun. And I'll leave it at that.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
Thank you.
So we are nearing the end of our time. I do have one more question that's come up in all of our conversations. Does anyone else have a question before I move on to my final question for Representative Canon?
Yeah, I have one more question. I forgot to raise
Okay.
my hand.
Go for it.
Okay. So on social media, there have been some rumors that at the state capitol, there was discussion among Republicans about examining the charter of the city of South Fulton, whether it needs to be revoked or not. Have you heard any of these rumors? And if that were to come up, how would you advocate for the charter of the city of South Fulton?
Thank you. I have not been privy to those conversations, but I would love to. I would love to hear what their thinking needs to be, so that we can have our own conversation with them very plainly about what we want. What I've heard, so far from community members over the past 2 years is kind of what you hear when any new city is created. Everything wasn't always the best. And there's places for improvement. I will say there are 51 new representatives who will be going back to the state capitol. This is the largest turnover in 40 years of legislators. So some of those legislators across the aisle, just keeping it totally honest, were just throwing stuff at the wall towards the end of their legislative career to fill some campaign promises. Were sticking their nose in places to cover for their other folks, depending on the way that the things that you're hearing, and I would love to hear it if you want to tell me. They were doing these same types of things, with the Atlanta airport and, Brownsfield and all kinds of ways to try to take away local power. It's been a really intense legislative session for the issue of local control. I don't know how much people have followed through the redistricting process, but normally locals, counties, cities, residents have the best say when it comes to their communities. And unfortunately, throughout this redistricting process, a lot of local control was usurped by the GOP. I'm looking forward to being at the table, though.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And anyone else have a question before I go ahead and ask my final question? Okay, I'll go ahead. So you said that you were an educator, and I am curious. So I'm critical of the charter system, right? Because I know that in a way it pulls funding from other schools potentially. And admittedly, my kids are at a charter school and it's a fantastic school and they have ponies and it's nature-based and there's art. But my feeling is I feel like every neighborhood should have a school that serves the community. And there's a great disparity between funding. As you know, North Fulton has a lot more funding for their schools in comparison to South Fulton, in terms of the county I'm speaking. And what work could be done so that we can even that out? I think that all schools should have it, a fair amount of funding, and every community deserves a local school that meets the needs of the kids. So yeah.
Totally. It's been interesting watching over the past 4 years, the state of Georgia funnel money into the Charter School Association. This idea that now there's this new state agency that is all charter. And some of those are public charter. Some of those are private charter. And what happens when there are infractions, or what happens when there's excellence? How does the state get to really talk about that in a real way? I think that it's no surprise that many members of the Democratic caucus are staunchly about public education being funded by public dollars and private charters not being funded by those public dollars. But there are a group of legislators who are on the fence about whether public charters, which are really public schools, should be able to receive that public funding. And I've been listening to the debate, I've been watching the bills. I do not serve on the education committee amongst the other ones that I serve on, but I'm just gonna be really plain that the state of Georgia is continuing to push in the wrong direction. We've got, at the same time, the ability to use public funding for private schools in general through vouchers. Now we've got private charter schools and we've got public charter schools. So I think there's really been a dissolution at a certain point that is about the state getting their hands in it. It's not really about Fulton County schools or APS or school board members being able to determine, like, okay, this community deserves this thing. It's really about the state trying to ask for national funding on some of the issues that come to it. So it's a little bit of a deep issue. I do think that concisely, I would like to say that I'm a product of public schools in Georgia. I grew up in Albany, Georgia, and went to public schools there. And when my family divorced and we moved, I went to a private school. So I have both seen, what it feels like to be a public school kid and a private school kid. I don't know what it feels like to be one of the charter school kids in either one of the two systems, but I'm concerned, deeply concerned, just about how our public dollars are spent. I'm hopeful that over the years, we'll get some other Democrats appointed to the education committees. We also have an education appropriations committee. We're hoping this year that we can get a Democrat appointed to that committee, and that would allow for us to have a little bit more hands in on how the funding moves in the next 2 years.
Okay, thank you for that. And I actually lied. I do have one more question. So
Awesome.
I heard you I heard you use the term reproductive justice. What work will you do? And I know that you have been doing work in this direction to help women have access to healthcare, reproductive healthcare, funding towards Planned Parenthood, for instance. I know that in comparison to other states, we have like a very small number of Planned Parenthoods. And I also know that, people have to travel from Alabama and different places to go to the very few that there are in Georgia, and I also know that it's likely an uphill battle to a certain degree in our state to get things done in this direction. But can you speak to your work in regards to that? You're still muted.
Yes, I was just pulling up the resolution that we did this year in honor of the 49th year of the Supreme Court decision of Roe versus Wade. We wanted to get 49 legislators to sign on to this idea of reproductive justice. And I'll put the link in the chat shortly as soon as I finish speaking. Reproductive justice is the convergence between reproductive rights, meaning that you have technically laws on the books that allow for pap smears and things like that. And then reproductive health. You have doctors and providers and birth workers and midwives, the people who actually do the work. But when you have these two pieces, if you don't factor in the justice part, meaning the transportation to get to the clinic, or the domestic violence that's going on in the home, or childcare for the kid, when that procedure is happening, you're not getting a full perspective on people's lives, and you're not setting people up to thrive. In fact, you're setting people up to depend on systems and get frustrated and possibly miss deadlines that are arbitrary and not based on science. So this year we did go ahead and introduce that resolution. I have continued to advocate staunchly and have been endorsed by Emily's List, Planned Parenthood Southeast, NARAL America, as well as NARAL Georgia, because I got my start working at a clinic. I was 23 and working at the Feminist Women's Health Center of Atlanta when I started to realize that I wanted to see my lawmaker, and I wanted to bring people to the state capitol to tell their reproductive justice stories. And that's how I got connected, like I told you before, to the legislator who ended up calling me and asking me to run for her seat when she resigned. Reproductive justice is almost everything to me. I serve on the board of Sister Song, which is the National Women of Color Reproductive Justice Collective. We were created back in 1991 when there were a group of Black and brown women at a UN conference, and everything was being talked about except for justice as it relates to health and rights. So the good old Representative Abel Mabel Thomas, who many of you may know, at that point, she was not in the House, but she was running for city council. She did a bunch of different positions. She called the table together and they came up with the term reproductive justice. And so it has been an honor to serve with representatives like Abel Mabel on the floor of the House to advocate for the things that we need, which right now it's really been pushing back against the 6-week ban. We were the plaintiff against Governor Kemp. So the lawsuit is Sister Song versus Kemp. And at that point, I served as the chair of the board. So have been deeply involved in trying to protect reproductive justice. But as we go forward, we've always been forward thinking about what we see we need next. So last year, we had the state legislator give up to 6 months of postpartum care for Medicaid. And this year we got them to put the money in the budget for it to be 1 full year. That doesn't start till July 1st. But if you know anyone who's having a baby and is on Medicaid, they can have a full year up until the next July for their checkups and all of those things. And we are currently working, as I was talking before with Ms. Pamela about WellStar. We've been working with WellStar to do a doula pilot program because they do value doulas, which are emotional support people during birth. They've logged like 22,000 hours of doulas over the COVID-19 pandemic. So they are open to having this kind of pilot program. And our goal with the pilot program is to get at the racial disparities that happen in pregnancy and in birth. We know that Black women die 3 times the rate of their white counterparts in the state of Georgia. We're either first or second or third behind Mississippi or Alabama in our death rate for both mothers and for babies. And so realizing that race is an issue when it comes to perinatal practices in our state has been something that WellStar is openly saying and being a part of. And so we want to use this pilot program to allow for doulas to do implicit bias trainings with nurses and healthcare workers. So I'm just super excited about doing all things RJ. Thank you for asking me about RJ.
Yeah, thank you for all of your work. That's wonderful. So I guess we've come to the end of, unless anyone else has a question. Thank you for all of your thoughtful responses, Representative Canon. And thank you to the community for all of the wonderful questions that people asked. And I don't know, Richard, if you want to share anything else to close out, but I guess that's a wrap for us today.
Yeah, I just wanted to also thank you, Representative Cannon, for joining us today with such short notice. I really appreciate it. On behalf of the South Fulton Coalition, I would like to let all the residents know that tomorrow we will be having the Georgia Superintendent of Schools town hall. So that will be at 7 p.m. and that should be over at 8:30 p.m. So that's the next town hall that we have. And then Mayor Khalid will be having his own town hall on his own platform on Sunday to discuss issues within the community. So please look out for that. He has that published on all the social media platforms. And with that being said, thank you everybody and have a good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
All right, good night.